Welcome to the Newcomers podcast, people, where I explore what it means to be an immigrant with immigrants like myself. Today, I'm talking with Keely Cronin, who runs a business called WorkSpark. Look, WorkSpark helps newcomers transition into jobs in Canada here. So they help you with resume, networking, and all that stuff. But you know what I loved about this conversation was something Keely validated for me, which is when we come here, everyone talks about getting a job, get a house, all those things. But you also need to, kind of work on yourself. So she talks about how, when you move, one of the first things you do is, experience Canada. Go out, talk to people and stuff. And I feel like why that's important is because when you do that, you start to feel comfortable in yourself, in your skin, in your new country. And you're more confident when you get into interviews. Because most times, and I understand people who struggle with that, most times we get in here and instantly you start, hey, I need a job, I need a job. You're going to get a job. But you need to fix your head before you start looking for that job. Let's get to the story. Enjoy. You shared this interesting post where you talk about we don't have jobs for Kenyan as it is. I think that was like the hook for the post. And I see that a lot. Like people just talk, and the biggest thing I always keep wondering about is like, where's that narrative coming from? The thing about, hey, Canada wants immigrants. That's the first part. Second part, we have a point-based system, which I think is one of the best in the world because
100%.
it does a good job of picking certain kind of people to fit certain things. I mean, we can argue about job immigrant fits and a Canadian experience and all that, but we do do a good job of saying, hey, you're good at what you do, come to Canada.
Yes.
But then they come in here and then it starts to feel like the rescue mission. And I'm just like, where's that mismatch coming from?
Yes, totally. I love that you pointed that out, that there's this sort of story we tell ourselves that we as Canadians, allow immigrants to come to Canada. We allow them to have the opportunities here. And we're not really talking about what they're bringing to us. And you're right.
Yeah.
Canada's immigration system is rigorous, right? There are, this better than anyone.
Yeah.
So many steps. There are so many processes. There are so many forms. And there are very many opportunities for people to demonstrate, here's what I'm bringing to Canada, right? And so it is interesting that then once someone comes to Canada, that narrative really shifts. And all of a sudden, it's not about what you're bringing to Canada. It's only about what Canada is bringing to you.
Yeah.
Right? I think that honestly, this has a lot to do with how Canada understands itself as a nation, sort of how we construct our identity. We are, and this is true, we are wonderful. We're welcoming. We're multicultural. We embrace difference and diversity. Those things are very true. But we're also very attached to that understanding of ourselves. It's very important to us as Canadians that that's how we are perceived. And so in a lot of ways, we have like the Canadian Multicultural Act. We have tons of different pathways for immigration. We really often define ourselves, especially sort of historically, in opposition to America, right? So we're multicultural, they're the melting pot, we're the peacekeepers, they're the warmongers, all of these things, right? We are very attached to this idea as Canadians that Canada is welcoming, diverse, less racist than America. I'm going to raise my eyebrows at that one. And that's the thing, is that framing of immigration really fits into our national identity because we want to think of ourselves as welcoming for an immigrant, a refugee, someone who needs opportunity or needs a chance at a better life. And I think that's so true, but it's also really important to acknowledge that, like, we can change the narrative here to really also talk about the fact that immigrants are allowed to come to Canada also allows them to bring their credentials, their education, sometimes decades of industry experience. In the post that you referenced earlier, I talked about the fact that so many immigrants start businesses. Immigrants are creating jobs in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we talking about that? And so I really think, if we want to sort of work on changing this narrative, I think Canadians like myself really have a responsibility to talk about immigration, build relationships with immigrants, and really learn about and acknowledge and talk about what immigrants are contributing to our country, right? Be really positive about that. Um, and I also have to say, I think, folks who do come to Canada from abroad, I've worked with so many clients who are so wonderful and so thankful for the opportunities that they've been given in Canada, and they should be, but they sometimes downplay what they're bringing. When they talk about their career in Canada, or when they talk about, their immigration journey, they talk so much about, the generosity of the people they've met here, the opportunities that they've had. And yes, right, you were welcomed warmly, I hope, right? You have had really positive experiences. But also, what did you bring, right? When you're talking about your immigration journey, when you're talking about your career in Canada, I think it's so valuable to talk about your own accomplishments, your own skills. Don't just talk about your Canadian experience. Also talk about what you did back home that set you up to be successful once you got here, right? So I think it is definitely a narrative that we should try to change. And I think that everyone can kind of play a part
Yeah.
in changing how we talk about it. I talked a
Gosh,
lot.
like no, not that. Like, so like, I've not seen someone put it like this before. No one
Okay.
has done that before. Yeah, because that thing you mentioned about how we Canadians say, this is who I am. Like, I'm multicultural. I'm not racist. I'm not this. I'm not that. There's this thing they say, what you resist persists. Like, so, so, like, yeah, what you resist persists. So, like, that's who we are.
Yes.
And the more often than not, that's the identity you put forward.
Mm-hmm.
Then reality starts, which is survival.
Mm-hmm.
Once survival kicks in, that conflict between the identity and surviving, it starts to
Yeah.
bring up a lot of things, because then, are you really multicultural if you can't really accept that people are exactly that different from who you are?
100%. 100%.
You know,
And no, you go ahead.
and gosh, and so no, because all I just kept thinking when you're saying that, I was just like, oh God, like, where? Because, like, the thing is, like, it feels like we're stuck in a loop of where we're doing this for certain reasons, but we haven't fully internalized it as a country why we are really doing it. And so the government talks about it at the top,
Yes.
but then once you just go down, further
Mm-hmm.
down, how we did with filters, where as it keeps going down,
Yeah.
the message changes. People want to survive. People want to leave. And then I think what also doesn't help is that every now and then it feels like our government goes into this, depending on what's politically correct, we see messages that
Mm-hmm.
kind of dance to that. And so in the end, even the people themselves are not exactly sure where the government stands, because you can always find a government point, or sorry, a government stance that suits where you stand at that point in time.
Yes, totally. And I mean, in Canada, it's complicated, right? Because I mean, I live in Alberta. I think the ideals and values of my provincial government are very different than the ideals and values
Oh yeah.
of the federal government,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, right? And what you said is so true. Like, there is a huge gap between the stories that Canadians tell themselves about immigrant experiences, about what it's like to come to Canada, about how welcoming Canada is, and the lived realities of
Oh yeah.
immigrants. Obviously, I can't speak to that. I'm Canadian. I'm a little white girl from Alberta. But so many of the stories that we share as a nation really only focus on the fact that we welcome immigrants, the fact that we, sometimes integrate them into our communities, the fact that we are a place where, we have festivals around different cultures, all of those things. But there's not really a lot of acknowledgement of how racism does still exist, obviously,
Yeah.
in Canada. Folks of color, immigrants, they experience discrimination, they experience microaggressions, they struggle to get work, they struggle to find housing, they struggle to integrate into their communities, right? And those are kind of inconvenient truths for Canada because they don't fit with
Fit with
how we
what
think
who we
about.
are. Yeah.
Yes, right? We've got this ideal in our heads, and those things really conflict with what that ideal says about us. And so it can
And so
be,
we kind of just like, you know what, pushed away. No, that's
yes,
not all.
yes, I don't want to talk about it, right? It can be very uncomfortable and
Yeah.
inconvenient for Canadians to talk about how immigrants might struggle in Canada, about how we maybe don't do the best job of addressing some of the structural barriers that exist here. Um, so it's really complicated, which is why I love that you wanted to talk about this. I love that you wanted to sort of have this conversation, because I do think it's in a conversation that needs to be circulated more often,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Because it's
people
uncomfortable.
contribute. It's so uncomfortable. um
Yeah.
but we got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think, because or else the narrative is never going to change.
Yeah, true, true. And I'm going to tell you a story now. I'll make a comment on what that thing you talked about, Canadian immigrants downplaying themselves. I'll just kind of talk
Yes.
from the perspective of an immigrant. When you're talking about the things we don't want to talk about, it just reminds me of a story a friend told me, and some part of my lived experience, which is that. So I look at my 4-year-old in daycare right now, and I just watch them, him and all the friends and stuff, and everything. They're all playing and stuff. Everyone is fine. Everyone is cool. What breaks my heart every single time is that when I now look at as the kids grow older, I start to see them segregate again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the worst one, where is worst is for, and is I'm hoping someone starts to work on it at some point, is that I see it happen more with the girls than the boys. I think boys, probably because of how they're wired, should probably just do differently. But with the girls, like this segregation just starts to get really wild. My friend told me a story that broke my heart about how his girl, who's in grade 6,
Okay.
it's the last day of school, or the celebration of the grade 6, where they're going to junior high. And you know he just said that what he just felt like was that what had happened was the colored kids had become a group and the other kids had become a group. And then this is the worst part of that story for me. When they would call the kids out, because the colored kids were a very small group,
Okay.
and because how people want to feel cool,
Of course.
they don't clap for themselves because they are not that much. So literally every single time they walked up to the podium to get their stuff, that they would call their name, this, that, and the lady would walk up. Her friends wouldn't clap for her because everybody just kept quiet. The other kids got a standing ovation because they had bigger crowds. They probably their families have been here for longer, so which means they have came with more people. And I just kept I still can't stop thinking about that moment in that young girl's life. I'm like, wait, like these kids all just walked up, and like it just feel like no one is there for us. And like he
Yes.
was, and I like what he did, what he said saying to them that, hey, like next time when you all get, like, just clap for yourselves and stuff. But I think for me, the other heartbreaking part of it was how, as they've grown older, for some reasons, we've again started segregating them. And like you said, it's an uncomfortable conversation because it's like, okay, why is that happening? These kids are 11, 12, 13, but they're already forming into groups. And they're like, what does that mean for the future? Because, I said this in a podcast I recorded probably like, I'm at episode 106 now. I think it was episode 40 where I said, I really do hope Canada is the greatest multicultural experiment ever. And if at the age of my kids we're still having racism, I would have given up on the world. Like, I'll give up on the world because it means that we can't ever fix it.
Yeah.
That's what I said. We can't, because it means that we're stuck with that. That's just who we are as human beings. As human beings, we'll always let our tribal feelings rule over the fact that we are all, we're different, but we're similar. Because when I talk to a lot of immigrants, I'm like, gosh, I think I leave every episode with like, gosh, we're so different. We're also so similar in a lot of ways. And so why are we doing all this every single time? But that was a long spell.
Why do we focus so much on difference? Why is difference the first thing that determines how we organize ourselves, right? It's like you said, we do the same thing with gender, boys and girls. We do the same thing with race. And it's unnecessary, because when you actually have conversations with people, you realize that regardless of some of those like external factors, you have so much in common with people, so much stuff that really actually matters, values that match, hobbies, passions, all of those things that match, right? And I mean, of course, things like language, things like culture, you go towards the people who are like you, right? But I think it's so important to start talking, and especially with kids at a young age, about the fact that you can have a lot in common with people, even if they look different from you, and even if they come from a very different context than you, right? And that is the whole premise, like you said, of the Canadian experiment, right? That is even our very founding, right? We were not a monolith from the beginning. French and English. How are we going to make these two things work together? I think it's still very up for debate how well that's gone. It's a journey. It's ongoing. But that was the very founding of Canada, right? And, we're still working as a nation on understanding, how does multiculturalism actually work? How do we integrate, as should have been done from the beginning, Indigenous people into this nation state, right? It's so complicated, but I think we just have to keep trying, right? It's a worthwhile project. We gotta try.
Yeah, we have no choice. Again, I do think we do a lot of things really well. I think we do a lot of things really well. I love this country. Like, I tell people, when people say, are you ever going to move to the States? I'm like, no.
To Canada.
like I love this country, so I think that we do a lot of things really, really, really well. Like, we're really good at a couple of things. But again, like we said even before the show started, I think is like every culture has its good side and its bad side. And I think it's just the thing about the human condition is, I think globally we're not exactly very comfortable talking about the uncomfortable parts of our existence. We don't like it, like, at all. We've never liked it for eons, and we still don't.
But those are the important conversations to have.
Because that's what improves us. Like, that's really what improves us as a species.
It does.
And then I think, before I miss out on the comment I wanted to make when you talked about kind of your experience and stuff, about people not being able to speak to themselves, I think it's kind of tied to what you mentioned about how, as a country, we don't want to talk about, we have the ideal of who we are, then there's the reality, and then we don't want to have that conversation. And so immigrants are stuck in between, because when you move to a new place, I feel like you reset. Like, for the first 1 year when I moved here, I struggled. Like, and it wasn't that I struggled. I got a job I got my first job in 4 weeks. I was coasting, I was balling, but like internally, like, I was all over the place, And I think there's all that, and so you're feeling gratitude. You're not sure of where to put yourself. You don't want to sound like as if you're the person who's being helped, and then you're saying, hey, this is, that sort of thing. And and then there's also the part of where, with Canadians, like, like Ritika's episode where she talks about how to get feedback from Canadians. Like you're not sure of how to get. You're learning that. You're like, okay, they say everything is fine, but I'm not sure everything is fine. Like so.
Right. Well, and Canadians are famously, supposedly very polite, right? And so if as an immigrant you are trying to sort of conform, sometimes it's perceived as impolite to do what feels like bragging about yourself. And so that
Yeah.
might feel like, okay, am I allowed to talk about my accomplishments in this particular cultural context where
Mm-hmm.
politeness is, so central? I can imagine that it would be so difficult to sort of like navigate that
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
landscape socially, culturally, right? It is, and it's very complicated too because it's not talked about, right? How do you figure it out other than by trial and error, kind of, right?
Yeah.
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 I had
Yeah.
I've had a few funny conversations with clients who have come from cultures who have been um, very uncomfortable talking about themselves. And they have said to me, this is a cultural thing. Where I come from, the individual's accomplishments, this is not how we operate. And so, when they're preparing for things like a networking event or a job interview, it feels fundamentally wrong to them to talk about their accomplishments, to boast about their skills. It feels so wrong. And that's obviously so important to be able to do in
Yeah.
order to get an opportunity. But we had to work sometimes on like really overcoming that sort of internal reluctance to do that. And on the other side of things, I've had clients from other cultures who have said, in my culture, we were super forward and we're super, I don't know, like very sort of extroverted and
Yeah.
social. We talk a lot, and I've had to have conversations with those people about the fact that sometimes to a Canadian you might be a bit much, which isn't to say that the way that you operate is wrong. It just doesn't fit with this cultural
Gosh.
context. It can go both ways, right? And how do you navigate that? How do you know? Right?
Culture is God.
It's so confusing.
Like where do you even start from? Like where you're like, oh, I can't be too much, but I can't be not too much. Like
Yes.
like you like so you're just bouncing in between.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Now that we're talking about this, actually, I was gonna add. So let's talk about WorkSpark because I feel like you do a lot of work with skilled newcomers and stuff. And tell me a bit about the thing you do. But I think the other thing I really want to know is seeing that you've worked with a ton of different kinds of clients.
Yeah.
Like, what would be your like someone who's trying to get going in Canada? Like 3-4 things they should do to kind of just start adjusting to the system itself. Because I mean, people say the Canada culture is very unique. I think I agree. It's a pretty interesting culture. I mean, but yeah.
I'll answer that last part first. So
Okay.
I think some of the most important things someone can do who's looking to like start their career in Canada. Number one, I would say like experience Canada. Stop worrying about getting a job, and start worrying about just like walking around your neighborhood, listening to the conversations, introducing yourself to someone at a coffee shop. Like just try to find some small ways that you can feel integrated into your community, because that is going to give you so much more confidence when it comes time to like really start actually job hunting, right? So often, and I totally understand this because it's so necessary, folks come here and the only thing they can think about is getting a job.
Yeah.
And I understand that. You need to live, you've got bills to pay, you've got
Mm-hmm.
family to support back home. Of course, you need to get a job. But it's going to be very difficult for you to be successful in a recruitment process, which is ever more competitive these days,
Yeah.
if you are not feeling at least somewhat comfortable in your environment. And then also, the other thing that we talked about earlier, you need to get good at talking about yourself. Understanding how your skills are transferable, understanding even sometimes how your experience as an immigrant, your experience adapting
Yeah.
to something totally new can be something that you can talk about as an asset that you're bringing to an employer, right? Um, and a lot of people just have a really tough time sort of doing that work of like, okay, what are my skills? What are my strengths? Where have I used those skills and strengths? And then what stories can I tell about
Yeah.
myself, my values, who I am as a person, my previous experience? How can I sort of build a story that I can feel confident delivering in order to help people see what I have to offer? And like that storytelling piece is, in my opinion, the most important part. You need to be able to tell your story.
You know, you finally put words into a thesis I've been thinking about. And I think I've said it a couple of times in the pod, which is you're right. People, there are bills to pay and all that stuff. But I know, and secondly, the second part about that is that people, when people say, hey, how do I help you? How can I settle in? The first thing people say to you is, oh, get a job, get a house, get that. But the thesis I've been battling with in my head is that those things are not the most important things. Like, so, and that thing you talked about, that integration piece, like, it feels like it's nothing, but it is everything. Because, yeah, because you're literally just saying to yourself, is what you're doing is you get into the country with all the self doubt and everything, and then you jump right straight into hiring, which is always competitive, which is you're not sure, like you don't even want, like you said, you don't even have a story, right? And one of the first part of even finding your story is like you get settled in, you speak to people, you start to get a sense of where you are, how things are done, how the
Yes.
bus system works. Oh, I understand. You and just that, I feel like just that feeling of being part of understanding the system kind of seeps into how you show up at conversations when you're networking, when you're trying to get a
Yes.
job. You know,
Totally.
you don't feel skittish. And I'm a big believer in energies. Like I feel like people give off energies, like people give off stuff
Yes.
when they, yeah, and I feel like if you're all skittish, like in the interview process, you give off that energy. Maybe the recruiter doesn't know and you don't know, but they just like say, no, 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 not this person. No, 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 we don't like this person. Why?
When
They can't even say.
yes, when I was hiring, my team would laugh at me because my like thesis was always vibes don't lie. Vibes don't lie. If somebody comes in and the vibes are nervous, the vibes are really unsure, they're not making eye contact, things like that. Sometimes you can just feel that
Yeah,
for one reason or another, and it's not always just because someone's nervous, sometimes it's just not a good fit, but
yeah.
if you're bringing that vibe into the room with you, when instead you could be bringing some confidence into the room with you, some excitement to be there. And you're never going to be perfect, right?
Yes, yes.
So many of my clients have said to me, I'm really nervous about my spoken English, right? And that is a very valid thing to be nervous about, of course. But one of the things that I really think is true, and I mean, I've been like a bit mean to Canada and Canadians in some ways so far. I really do think though that most Canadians will try to understand you, and they will understand if your interview
I,
doesn't go
I
good,
agree with that. I agree with that,
the
actually.
English isn't perfect.
I
That's okay.
agree.
If I can see that you're trying and
I
that you
agree.
want to be there and that you are showing up with as much confidence as you can like muster in that moment, I am going to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm still going to listen to your story about what you have to offer, right? It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
I agree. I agree with that part about Canadians. Like, I mean, Americans not sure. Americans will literally just say, "Hey, I don't get you. What you saying?" But sorry, Americans. I mean, Trump might not give you a visa anymore. What? I don't care.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
But yeah, like I agree with that. And you're so on point with that about the vibes. Like, yes, it's not everything every single time. But
Nope.
I think for me, even just for yourself, for your peace of mind, it's just like, because you that energy that because you're in a hurry, you want to pay the bills, you want to do stuff. And I understand some people might be in a different situation where, for reasons that beyond their control, they kind of have to get on the start going. I get that,
Yes,
all that.
for sure. Yeah.
But it, even if you have to do that, I feel like part of the biggest takeaway from what you're saying here is spend some time trying to even understand how the country works. I think that's why, and
Mhm.
this is me not trying to advertise the Canoe app that's run by ICC, but I think that, like, I love that platform because I'm like, hey, this is just download the app, it's free, and
Yes.
get free access to something. It's just
Yes.
one thing. Just
Yes. Go and
go,
experience Canadian
yeah,
culture. Yes.
exactly. Just go in there. Oh yeah, it's because you don't have money, right? You're scrounging on your bills because you just got it. Okay, get free access to certain places.
Yep.
See how things work. Talk to the guard. Talk to the guide. Speak to someone there. Buy coffee while you're at it. Go home
Yep.
and watch how the next interview is the next day. You're probably
Yes.
much more relaxed than you are if you had just spent the whole day worrying about that
Uh,
interview.
Totally. Totally. 100%. And the other thing too is, we're talking about sometimes people have very valid reasons to just come and get a job. And in those situations, lots of folks end up working in the service industry, right? They'll end up working in retail, they'll end up working in fast food. And those jobs are important and they are needed. And the people who work those jobs absolutely deserve respect.
Yes.
And also, I hope that someone who is working one of those jobs can have the perspective that if they want out of that kind of job, they will find the support that they need to help them get out of that kind of job. If they have qualifications, if they have experience from back home, how do I get into my industry? How do I use my skills? I'm not feeling fulfilled working at Tim Hortons,
Yeah.
right? How do you get out of that? That is so hard, but there is support for that kind of thing. And also, in your job at Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Shoppers Drug Mart, whatever it is, you are experiencing everyday Canadian culture. You
Yes.
have an opportunity here to
Yeah.
observe how the corporate world works, how Canadians interact with one another, how some of the sort of cultural norms that might seem strange to you work out in the real world, right?
Yeah.
And so if that is not sort of like an end goal for you, I hope you can find a way to take what you can from it, learn what you can from it, not be afraid to talk about that experience. So many people will say, oh, I'm an engineer. I have an engineering degree from Pakistan, but I have some work experience, but I'm here and I'm working at Tim Hortons and I don't want to put that on my resume. I really think that you have beautiful Canadian experience, which is not the only important thing, but it is important. And you're developing soft skills. You're learning about Canadian culture. You're interacting with Canadians who
Yeah.
make your Tim Hortons coffee very I might add, right? This is such a great opportunity. Put that on your resume, right? And find a way to talk about. I don't care that you serve somebody coffee, but I care as an employer that learned how to communicate effectively with people, that you worked well with a team in a very busy fast food location. Those kinds of things really matter, and they are so transferable to an engineering job maybe someday. Um, it's really tricky sometimes to frame your experience that way, but it
Yeah.
can be done.
It can be
Absolutely.
done. It can be done. It can be done.
Yep.
And that thing you say is part of something somewhere. I've seen this in a lot of places where they say what you focus on is what amplifies.
I love that. Yep.
Which is why I talk to a lot of people and I say to them, because when people send me messages or reach out to me and stuff and they're talking, and I'm like, hey, I am not saying that things are not bad. I am not saying, like, we can talk about those things.
Yep.
But what you must never do is feel like a victim. What you must never do is you get that job and you start saying to yourself that, oh, this is the end of it. Canada is not working for me. Like, of course
Yes.
you can feel frustrated,
Of course.
feel it, the emotion, feel the emotion. Just don't react to that emotion, please. Like,
Mhm.
the emotion is not you. The moment is
Yes.
not you. I say that to immigrants all the time. It's a moment, not you. Like,
Yep.
what we do a lot of times is that we take the moment and we internalize the moment, and the moment becomes our identity. And then we say, why am I not moving forward? Well, you're walking around with a big rock on your head and calling yourself a victim, and then you're wondering why the world is not moving for you. Like,
Mm. Mhm. And I mean, I see that all the time too. If you look anywhere, sort of in the news and stuff right now, obviously the job market is very, very competitive right now. I think
mhm,
there actually are opportunities out there, but the number of applicants that those opportunities are seeing is so high.
yeah,
Um, I don't want to deny that reality. That is absolutely a reality. It is very
yeah,
difficult. And it's even more difficult when you have international experience, when English isn't your
hmm
first language. You have
hmm
some
hmm
additional barriers to face. But I also do really think that your perspective on that is crucial. And if you are putting yourself out there, you're networking, you're getting out of your comfort zone, you're using some supports that are available to you, you're trying to find ways, like you said, some free resources. There
yeah,
are things out there that can help you push through
yep,
that
yep,
tough moment that you're in. But if
yeah.
you don't have a mindset that says it's possible to push through that tough moment,
You won't.
you're not going to move.
You
Yeah.
won't. You're not going. You're not going. Not like nothing will happen. I mean, I think it was there's this lady I interviewed who talked about how in Ontario they did some research on immigrants, and I mean, I don't want to, like I always say also, you don't want to also glorify resilience. Like, we shouldn't glorify resilience, but we should to some extent, which they said is the folks who kind of stick to it are the ones to kind of make it. Because also, why we should glorify resilience, I also think that just moving to a new country is like you being a baby all over again.
Yep.
But this time around, with the unfortunate burden of your past experience.
Uh, mm, mm-hmm.
Because a child has no burden. Like, oh, a child is experiencing life. Oh wow,
Yeah.
it's a car. Oh god, that is camera. Oh shit. Oh, the mic. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
As an adult, you're like, they drink Tim Hortons here. Ew, I don't like Tim Hortons.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have that sense of wonder,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. There's no sense
Yeah.
of wonder. Yeah, and so that's the battle you're battling with. And I think just accepting that,
Yeah.
it sort of helps you to just handle it much better. Like, it doesn't mean that you will not fail. Like, you will sometimes struggle, but you're much better at just going through the thing. Like, you
Yeah.
you handle it way better than you would if you just kept on fighting entirely with yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree. I totally agree. And I mean, I do think though, you are right. Like you can only be so resilient. Um, and so I hope that we start to see some shifts in how immigrant talent is kind of perceived, right?
Yeah,
Because I mean, you can be a great storyteller, you can have a great education, a great background, but if there's this sort of deep-seated bias and a resistance on the other end, there's
it's
almost nothing
impossible.
that you can
Yeah,
do, nothing you can say, right? And so, if though you are meeting with an employer who's willing to meet you halfway, or even you're networking with someone who just has an open mind, right? They hopefully will see what you have to offer. They'll see your transferable skills. They'll be curious, right?
mm,
About maybe your unconventional background, right? And so I think it kind of has to go both ways. Even if you have someone who is amazing at telling their story, if the person on the other end isn't open to considering potential beyond like an exact perfect match,
yeah,
then right. And so that is, I think, and I hope, a shift that um we're starting to see a little bit, and I really hope it continues.
yeah. I want to, now that you say this, I want to talk about out entrepreneur out why we can't
Yes.
out entrepreneur policy, but we seem to have you haven't answered my question on what exactly WorkSpark
Oh,
does. Please,
yes.
yeah,
Okay.
please. So let me know.
Yes, totally. So yeah, WorkSpark is a company that I founded with a business partner. And I think it's very important that you know how we started. So my business partner is named Manoj, and he is originally from India. He immigrated here in, I want to say 2016, to do an MBA at the University of Alberta. And at that time, I was a career coach in the MBA program, and Manoj was my coachee.
Interesting. I
He
love that.
Yes. Oh, we had so much fun together. We had the best time, and he was looking to make a career change from, an engineer in the oil and gas sector to something around sort of like public service, policy, something like that. So not only was he changing countries, he was also making like a pretty significant career.
Yeah, that's a huge jump.
Big jump. Yep. But he was amazing. He worked so hard. He networked like crazy. And he made a really successful career change. And I supported him through that, which was my honor, honestly. But after that happened for like a couple years, he was getting people coming out of the woodwork saying to him, like, how did you do this? You are such an inspiration, but like, how did you make this big shift? And so he approached me in 2021 and was like, I think that you and I, if we teamed up, we could help some people who are looking to make that same transition that I've made. So yeah, we started WorkSpark, and since then, I mean, we've done tons of like individual coaching. So, working with people on making transitions, whether it's from another country to Canada, whether it's within industries, sometimes helping people get promoted. We do, custom resumes. We work with folks on interview skills, and then lots of just like, what am I doing with my life and how do I figure it out kind of stuff, which is my favorite stuff. I love that. But then we've also been super lucky to get to work with some groups. So, we've run workshops for, international engineers on, intercultural communication in the workplace. How do
Oh,
you
that is
sort of
important.
understand?
Yeah.
Yes, it's so important, right? So yeah, we've been doing lots of stuff around, networking in Canada as a newcomer. We did a session last summer through the Africa Center here in Edmonton for Black entrepreneurs. And, how do you make some connections in sort of Edmonton's entrepreneur space,
Yeah.
get some support as an entrepreneur? We've done stuff around sort of like understanding workplace culture in Canada. And then also too, we try to host some events where people can, practice some of those skills, talking
Mm.
about themselves, networking in a little bit of a lower risk environment, because it is
Yeah.
to go to a networking event. But if you've had an opportunity to like come to one of our workshops, you've maybe met some of the other participants, you know that I'm not scary at all. Manoj is the chattiest person you'll ever meet. It's a lot less daunting to come and like practice some of those
Yeah.
skills in that environment. And then you have the confidence to go out and do it in an industry mixer or something like that. So yeah, I feel so lucky to do this work. I have so much fun with it. I feel
You're talking about that. You're shy.
I know. I love it. I love it so much. And I've met some really incredible people through this work that have become, friends. So yeah, it's WorkSpark is so much fun for me.
I like the name though. Like it's WorkSpark. Like
Thank
WorkSpark.
you. Yes. We worked very hard, and for a very long time, we workshopped a lot of things. And
Tell me.
WorkSpark was the one that stuck.
Tell me. Do you still remember like 3 of the worst ones? Just curious.
Oh gosh, I don't know. We were like, we really wanted something around like the like fresh start transition, but everything sounded terrible. Honestly.
Tell me 3, please.
I don't even like job start. Right? Like just terrible. Just terrible. So
I,
WorkSpark is
I
where we
feel like
landed on full
naming is
stop.
something. Yeah,
Yes,
naming is an interesting thing. But if you get it right, like if you get it right, like it's like because
yes,
this just works. Like it works. Like
it does.
work spark. Like
WorkSpark. Yep. Yeah.
okay, and we're rounding up right now. I think so. The thing, like when we were already talking a bit about it, where you said talked about how you can be as resilient as you want, but if the person's not willing to move, like you can't do anything about that. And I think if we kind of raise that up a bit and talk about from a government point of view, because I feel like a ton of the issues we're having, and I'm not calling anyone out, I feel like it's just structural issues. A lot of them are policy conversations
Yeah.
because like no matter what you do, if there are structural barriers that exist because of bureaucracy or because of systems that no one has sat down to say, how do we rework this?
Yeah.
There's so much you can do. You can't build businesses to change those barriers. Those barriers have to move at the level of government or culture, that's the thing. And from your experience, like, do you think, like, how do we even start to change the narrative and hopefully influence policy? Like, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in some ways, just lots of transparency around the immigration process would be helpful, right? Just to do whatever we can to sort of like educate people around who is coming to Canada, right? To hopefully kind of like combat some of those incorrect ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, also, too, just lots of support for programs like settlement services, language training, career support, reskilling, upskilling, because that will help people actually integrate. But
Hmm.
if it's just a nonprofit that's trying to provide those programs, and this year they get funding and then next year they don't get funding, that's not really going to help the situation, right? It has to
Yeah.
come from a more consistent source. um, and then I think also one of the big issues is that credential recognition is
Oh, yeah.
so difficult. The process is so long, it's so confusing. um, it's not the same across provinces at
Mm-hmm.
all. And so, I mean, that is, I think, the thing is, if there was some sort of, you know, streamlining that could happen with credential recognition, if there was, some kind of incentive from the provinces to regulatory boards to speed up the process, to
Mm-hmm.
maybe provide mentorship through the process, make it clear what the process is. I think there's tons of talent that just goes untapped here because people don't know how to navigate the
Yeah.
credential recognition process. They don't have the resources, they don't have the time because they're too busy working their 9 to 5 to pay the bills, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is one thing that sort of structurally could really make a big impact on the ability to actually change the narrative.
Yeah. Especially that credential one. I feel like that is one
Mm.
thing that we could do that could unlock a lot of value for the country. Just to some extent, just equalizing it across all provinces. Like, hey, and so the people move in and you're clear about what you need. Because it almost feels like you're moving to Canada and you're not even sure what means what. Because it depends on where you're at. It depends on
Yeah.
who you're talking to. It depends
Yep.
on what association you're dealing with.
Yep.
Like, come on,
Yep.
we can do better.
There are so many layers to navigate, right? Like federal, provincial,
Yeah.
regulatory bodies. There's not a lot of clarity for people who want to navigate that process. And also, like I said, work a full-time job, navigate things in English when that's not your first language. It's so tricky to sort of get through what feels like this really impenetrable barrier. And so I think a lot of people probably don't bother trying or they just give
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if there was more support for that, and if the process itself was faster, clearer, more supported, I think that would have a huge impact. And also, too, that would obviously enormously benefit immigrants, but it would also enormously benefit Canada's economy, right?
Gosh,
Those people have so much to offer, and instead of doing something that doesn't let them unlock their full potential, they could be doing something that really would contribute.
yeah,
So it would be a win-win, honestly.
that's a good place to end this. Because I'm like, what else could we add? Like, because
What else can
you're
you
right.
say, right?
Yeah, because you're right. Like, win-win. Like,
Yep,
because almost every single time, I think it's kind of linked back to where we started this conversation.
it
Is
does.
it feels like we're always saying, "Oh, Canada is losing, the immigrant is gaining."
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, Canada is the one at
Yeah.
and then we poor citizens are not getting jobs, bro. Everybody wins if we do this right. Like everybody wins.
Everybody wins if we do this right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Keely.
That was such a fun
Thank you.
conversation. I really enjoyed that, Dozy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Like, gosh, that was a good one. That was a really, really good one. You agree, right? As always, please, if you found this useful, please send it to someone who's out there. If you know someone who we should talk to, send them my way. Like, share, subscribe on Substack, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast, we're there. Ciao, people.